I was just minding my own business when Karen, the notorious homeowner association enforcer, turned a simple car wash into a complete neighborhood battle. As tensions increased and secrets exposed, will I be able to reclaim the peace of my own home? Welcome to our channel. Please subscribe if you want more Karen and homeowner association stories. It was a warm Saturday afternoon. I was washing my car, enjoying the sunshine, when a loud shout destroyed the peace. In that moment, everything changed. I had no idea that a simple car wash on my own driveway could create such anger in our quiet neighborhood. As I scrubbed away, I heard the rushed steps of someone marching toward my house. It was Karen. Karen was known around the neighborhood for being controlling and always demanding that things be done her way. In her eyes, I was breaking some rule that only she could understand. My heart raced as Karen stopped right in front of me. Her face red with rage, she shouted, "You can't let my parents use your driveway for their car wash." Her voice was loud and filled with the kind of force I had never witnessed before. I tried to explain that I was just cleaning my own car and that I had every right to use my driveway, but Karen wouldn't listen. Even in my calm state, I felt a flicker of concern. How could a car wash create so much chaos? That first moment was the spark that ignited a conflict. I knew that if I let this slide, more issues would come my way. I decided then that I must understand all the facts of the situation. So I began my own research. I went online and looked up the neighborhood policies and the property maps that showed exactly where each house's limits lay. I learned that my driveway was clearly marked as my property. The policies were written down in small print, but they were direct. I could use my driveway as I wished, as long as I did not damage anyone else's property. I saved copies of these documents, knowing that having them would be beneficial later. I made sure to keep my voice calm and polite, even when I felt disturbed inside. I thought, if I can show the reality, maybe I can ease down this furious storm. I began writing down everything I experienced that day, from the moment I started washing my car until Karen had stormed off in frustration. I did not want to miss a single detail, because I knew that every fact would be essential. A few minutes after Karen left, I heard the distant sound of a siren. I looked up and saw flashing blue lights in the driveway. I felt a cold drop of anxiety. I never expected the situation to become so severe that the police would be called. I stood there, my hands still covered in soap, wondering how a simple car wash had become a community dispute. I recalled that I had seen news stories about similar incidents in other neighborhoods, and I knew then that sometimes a small argument could turn into a big, complicated battle. I took a deep breath and went back inside my house to calm my restless thoughts. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and began to type notes. I wanted to capture every detail, the exact time of Karen's arrival, her furious words, and even the way her eyes shined with a kind of pride and superiority. I was determined to gather all the proof I could, and I even started recording a short video of my driveway that day. I knew that if the story spread, the truth must be known. In the back of my mind, I recalled the lessons I had learned about the law and property rights. I remembered a time when a teacher explained that our rights as homeowners were safeguarded by documented rules. With that memory, I felt a sense of duty. I had to stand up for myself, not with aggression, but with facts and a calm persistence. I was like a detective assembling a puzzle, and every piece of information made the picture sharper. As the day turned into evening, the neighborhood became silent again, but the tension in the air was still there. I couldn't help but think about the eyes of my neighbors watching the situation unfold from their windows. I wondered if they felt as anxious as I did. Some of them had been known for doing little things that sometimes irritated others, like playing loud music late at night or leaving their garbage out. But today, their murmurs felt different. They were discussing the matter as if it were a controversy, and I realized that this event had become much greater than just a car wash. I decided to call my friend Alex, who had some understanding about local laws and even had experience with conflicts like these. Alex listened attentively as I explained everything, nodding as he asked questions and taking notes. "You need to record everything and be ready to show the property maps and the regulations," he advised. His composed voice gave me confidence, and I knew that I wasn't alone in this struggle. I promised myself that I would not retreat, even if it meant confronting Karen and her followers again. Later that night, I received an unexpected email from a local news journalist. The email said they had heard about the strange incident and were interested in my side of the story. I felt a mix of surprise and worry. The idea of my story reaching many people was both thrilling and intimidating. It meant that the reality about what had happened might get out, but it also meant that I was stepping into a larger world of public opinion. I spent a long time deciding what to say, choosing my words carefully so that I would not disclose too much. Yet I wanted to keep people engaged, to have them listen to every detail I would share next. I went to bed that night with a heavy heart, knowing that tomorrow might bring more obstacles. I could still see Karen's furious face in my mind, and I wondered what her next action would be. Would she call the police again? Or would she gather the other neighbors to support her cause? I thought about all the research I had done, the property maps I had saved, and the legal information that supported my rights. I felt ready, but I also knew that sometimes the truth gets distorted when people are caught up in their emotions. Before I drifted off to sleep, I stared out of my window at the silent street. I knew that the battle was only just starting. The incident on my driveway was a small fracture in the wall of our community, and I feared that it might grow into something much bigger and more distressing. My mind buzzed with questions and fears, but one thing was clear: I had to be courageous. I had to stand up for what was right, not just for myself, but for everyone who believed in justice and integrity. As I closed my eyes that night, I remembered the advice of my teacher, who always said, "Facts are the light in the darkness." I clung to that thought, determined to let the light of truth guide me through the challenges ahead. The journey would not be smooth, but I was prepared. I promised myself that I would use every tool at my disposal: research, property maps, legal guidance, and even the power of media to make sure that fairness was upheld. Little did I know, this was only the start of a story that would change my life and our neighborhood forever. In those early moments of the evening, I made a silent pledge. I would not let Karen's rage and privilege force me into a corner. I would stand firm and fight for what was mine. Even as the night grew dark, my determination shone bright. I knew that with every step I took, I was building a case that would eventually reveal the truth, no matter how many hurdles lay in my path. The first act of this unfolding drama had set the stage for a battle of wills, where facts and justice would have to triumph over privilege and arrogance. And so, as I lay there, in the silence of the night, I prepared myself for whatever came next. I had the proof, I had the awareness, and most of all, I had the resolve to see this through, even if I had to face furious neighbors, interfering officials, or even more unforeseen surprises. I knew that I was fighting not just for my car wash, but for the right to live peacefully in my own home. The night was deep and the future unclear, but my story was just beginning, and I was ready to write every chapter. I remember the day when everything took a new direction. I was still unsettled by the shock of Karen calling 911 over my driveway. I woke up that morning with a heavy heart, wondering what could possibly happen next. Immediately, I knew I had to defend my home and my rights. I felt both uneasy and determined. I had to learn more about the rules and diagrams of our property. I spent my first morning with a cup of tea and a stack of documents examining the property maps that showed exactly where my driveway ended and where the public area began. I couldn't believe that Karen, with her loud and authoritative voice, would try to alter something that was clearly mine. That day, as I sat at my desk, I found a glimmer of hope in the details written in the records. The maps were specific. My driveway was my space. I also read a few pages from the Homeowner Association rulebook, which stated that every homeowner had the right to use their own property as they wanted as long as they did not disrupt others. These facts were my first step in forming a case against Karen's false claim. The discovery felt like a minor victory, and it gave me the courage to stand up to her controlling ways. Later that afternoon, while I was sorting through more records, my neighbor, Mr. Thompson, knocked on my door. He had a concerned look on his face and told me that Karen had been speaking to several other neighbors about how I was altering the rules. Her words were severe and offensive, and I could see that her resentment was spreading like wildfire. Mr. Thompson said he had always respected me because I always tried to keep things fair and calm. His support meant a lot to me, but it also made me realize that this issue could escalate if I didn't act quickly. I decided to take the next step and visit the local library. I needed to learn even more about property regulations and find past examples of similar cases. In the library, I sat at a quiet table and read through books and online sources about homeowners' rights. The language was sometimes a bit complex, but I took my time and made simple notes on what I learned. I discovered that many people had stood up to similar objections by using maps and official paperwork. I felt like I was not alone in this struggle anymore. Each piece of information made me more certain that I was right and that I deserved peace in my own home. During my research, I also found some news reports about other neighborhoods that had faced disputes with the homeowner association. They talked about how community voices had united to solve problems, and some cases even reached the local news. The idea of media attention was interesting. I started to think that maybe sharing my story could help others and also put pressure on the homeowner association to do the right thing. I took thorough notes and saved a few articles on my computer. Every new detail I uncovered was like a little light in the dark, guiding me through a maze of rules and hostile words. One bright morning, while I was walking down the street, I saw Karen at her usual spot near the community center. She was speaking loudly to a group of neighbors, her tone as sharp as a blade. I could hear fragments of her speech. She was claiming that my driveway was being used in a way that harmed the community. My heart pounded, but I kept a composed face. I knew that this was just another part of her strategy to push her way into a decision. I took out my phone and made a discreet note of the conversation, hoping to recall every detail. I also noticed that a few of the neighbors seemed uncertain by her words. They looked around and murmured among themselves. I wondered if they, too, might discover the truth from my research. That evening I met with a small group of neighbors who had been affected by Karen's demanding behavior. We sat in my living room, and I shared what I had learned from the property maps and the homeowner association rulebook. I explained that my driveway was clearly marked as my own, and that there was no rule allowing Karen's parents to use it for a car wash. The room was silent at first, but soon a soft murmur of agreement filled the space. One neighbor, Lisa, mentioned that she had seen similar markings on her own property and that the documents had always worked in her favor. Another neighbor, Jim, said he was impressed by me for standing up for what was right. Their support made me feel like a little spark of truth was beginning to spread in our community. Over the next few days, I gathered every piece of evidence I could find. I printed out the property maps, made copies of the homeowner association rules, and even recorded my conversations with Mr. Thompson and some other neighbors. I wanted to have a strong case when I eventually needed to speak up at the next homeowner association meeting. I also started to write a precise summary of what had happened, step by step, so that I would not overlook any important detail. My goal was to be clear and truthful, showing that I was only trying to protect my home and respect the community guidelines. Just when I thought I had everything under control, an unexpected turn came. A local journalist named Sam approached me on the street. He had heard fragments of the story and was interested in what was really going on. Sam's eyes were sincere, and he promised to help me share the truth with the public in a fair way. At first, I was nervous that this might make things even worse. However, I realized that an honest story in the media might help clear up all the confusion and even compel the homeowner association to listen to reason. With his gentle reassurance, I agreed to meet him for an interview. The day of the interview arrived, and I felt a mix of nervousness and hope. Sam asked me straightforward questions about my property and the unusual complaint that had started all this. I explained in simple words how I had examined the property maps and read the homeowner association rules to understand my rights. I talked about the proof I had gathered and how I felt that Karen's actions were damaging the community bond. Sam listened attentively and took notes. He said that he would write an article that told my story clearly and simply so that everyone, even a young student, could understand the truth. The thought of the truth being shared with many people made me feel like I was winning a small battle against an unfair system. That night, as I sat at my table with the papers spread out, I felt a surge of determination. I knew that Karen would not back down easily, and I expected more intense meetings and harsh words. But I also knew that I had the facts and the support of my neighbors. Every map, every rule, every piece of evidence I collected was like a shield against the storm of privilege that Karen had brought. I even made duplicates of the documents so that I could distribute them if needed. I felt like a detective carefully assembling a puzzle that would reveal the true picture of my rights and the unfair claims of Karen. In the days that followed, murmurs of my growing research began to circulate through the neighborhood. I saw people nodding as they passed by, and I heard a few encouraging words from neighbors who had once been too hesitant to speak up. Even some, who were uncertain of their own rights, started to ask me questions about the property maps and the legal regulations of our homeowner association. I shared what I knew with a warm smile and careful explanations, always keeping my words simple and truthful. I wanted everyone to understand that this was not just about one driveway, but about fairness and respect in our little community. Every time I spoke to someone, I made sure to leave a hint of curiosity about what might come next. I would say, "You wouldn't believe what I discovered last night." Or, "There is one more thing in these maps that I'm still trying to understand." These little hints made my neighbors listen more closely and wait eagerly for the next update. Even when Karen tried to interrupt our discussions with her loud voice, I would calmly show the documents I had collected and explain the simple facts. It was like building a wall of reality against her angry words. I continued to meet with Sam, the journalist, to give him more details about what had happened. Every time we talked, he assured me that the full story would soon be known by everyone. The idea of media exposure made me feel like a symbol of truth, ready to reveal the unfairness that had troubled my home for so long. But I was careful not to disclose too much too soon. I wanted to keep a little intrigue alive, so that everyone would be eager to learn what I had uncovered next. It was like leaving a puzzle half completed, inviting others to come closer and learn more. As I moved forward with my research and preparation, I felt both the burden of responsibility and a growing sense of optimism. I knew that Karen would try to retaliate with all her strength, and that the homeowner association might be influenced by her loud claims if they did not see the clear proof in the maps and regulations. But I also knew that truth and justice had a way of prevailing even when things seemed uncertain. Every new document I examined, every friendly conversation I had with a neighbor, and every encouraging word from Sam made me more certain that I was on the right path. And so, with my papers neatly arranged and my heart firm, I prepared for the next challenge. I promised myself that I would keep working, keep learning, and keep revealing the truth, no matter how difficult it became. The next steps were uncertain, and I felt the thrill of both concern and anticipation. What would Karen do next? How would the homeowner association react when they saw all the proof I had gathered? I did not have all the answers yet, but I knew that my calm, steady strategy was the best defense against privilege and unfairness. I ended the day with a deep breath and a quiet grin, knowing that every move I made was a step toward a just resolution. I was not alone. I had the backing of my neighbors, the strength of the law, and a clear truth shining in my records. I closed my eyes, wondering what the next day would bring, and feeling a spark of confidence that the truth would triumph over anger. The moment I stepped into the meeting room, my heart pounded like a drum. I saw Karen sitting at the front, her eyes burning with fury, and I knew this would not be an ordinary meeting. I held a folder filled with property maps, legal notes and news reports, proof of my rights and hard work. I spoke firmly, explaining that my driveway was mine by law, and I showed everyone the maps that defined our property lines. I read from the regulations the homeowner association had established, and I could see a few astonished faces in the crowd. Karen interrupted with loud complaints that her family deserved special treatment, but I stayed composed and kept speaking. I explained how I had spent hours researching, using legal information to back up my statements, and even reached out to the media to share my story. Every fact I presented made it harder for anyone to deny the truth. The room fell silent as the proof spoke for itself. I wondered if Karen's fury would fade under the strength of these facts, or if her demands would only grow stronger. My determination shone through each word, knowing I had built a case that could not be easily ignored. The homeowner association president, a usually gentle-mannered man named Mr. Henderson, cleared his throat. "Karen," he said, his voice unexpectedly firm, "we've seen the maps, we've read the rules. It seems that your neighbor has clearly proven their rights." Karen's face contorted into a mask of pure rage. "This is unbelievable," she yelled, slamming her fist on the table. "You're all betraying me. My family has always been honored in this neighborhood." "Respect is earned, Karen," Mr. Henderson replied, his voice still calm. "And it's based on fairness and following the rules, not on commands and intimidation." A wave of murmurs spread through the room. Some neighbors nodded in agreement. Others exchanged understanding glances. I could see a few hesitant smiles directed my way. It was as if a wall had crumbled and the truth was finally flowing openly. I watched Karen, her face now a shade of deep red, her eyes narrowed and filled with a poisonous glare. I knew this wasn't the end. She wouldn't surrender easily. But for the first time, I felt a wave of optimism. I had held my ground. I had presented the facts. And I had won the first struggle. The meeting continued, but the atmosphere had changed. The air was lighter. The pressure had eased. Mr. Henderson proposed a motion to officially recognize my rights to my driveway, and it was accepted unanimously. Even Mr. Thompson, who had initially seemed doubtful, raised his hand in support. As the meeting concluded, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It was over, for now, at least. I gathered my documents, feeling the weight of the folder in my hands, a symbol of the effort and persistence that had brought me to this moment. As I walked out of the room, I saw Sam, the journalist, waiting for me. He gave me a thumbs up and a wide grin. "That was quite a performance," he said. "You handled yourself like a professional." "It wasn't easy," I admitted, a small smile forming on my lips, "but it was worth it." "Your story is going to make a real impact," Sam said, his eyes filled with admiration. "It's a reminder that even in the face of intimidation and privilege, the truth will always win." The next day, Sam's article was published. It was a clear, precise account of the events, with quotes from me and Mr. Henderson and copies of the property maps and homeowner association rules. The article spread rapidly in our small town, and soon people from other neighborhoods were reaching out to me, sharing their own experiences of homeowner association conflicts and Karen-like encounters. The response was overwhelming. I received emails and phone calls from people thanking me for defending my rights, for showing them that they weren't isolated in their struggles. I even heard from a few people who had previously been too nervous to speak out against Karen, but who now felt encouraged to do so. Karen, of course, was enraged. She tried to discredit the article to claim that it was filled with falsehoods and misrepresentations, but the evidence was clear, the facts were undeniable, and her attempts to twist the story only made her appear more desperate and unreasonable. The neighborhood began to shift. People were more aware of their rights, more willing to challenge authority, more determined to defend what was right. The fear that Karen had imposed in the community began to disappear, replaced by a sense of strength and unity. My driveway, once the center of a petty dispute, became a symbol of persistence and justice. It was a reminder that even the smallest act of resistance could have a ripple effect, motivating others to stand up for their own rights and freedoms. This story teaches us that even in the face of overwhelming resistance, the truth and justice will win if you stand your ground with facts and calm persistence. Do your research, collect proof, and don't be afraid to seek help from others. Remember, you have a right to live peacefully in your own residence. What do you think of this story? Have you ever encountered a similar situation? Share your opinions in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories of fairness and strength.